Samburu Reserve, late morning. A leopard lies stretched across the pale soil beside a collapsed termite mound. Its body is long, still, and open to the sun, not curled, not alert. Flies gather near the base of its tail and legs. Its chest rises so shallowly that the motion disappears if not watched closely. Ribs press like wires beneath the coat. One paw is turned in slightly, claw tips faintly exposed. The eyes are half-lidded, a dull amber dimmed by dust and exhaustion. Nuru had seen movement from a distance, barely more than a flicker, a shimmer of shape against the light-baked soil. He stepped down from the patrol ridge carefully, unsure what he'd find. There were no vultures overhead, no hyena scent, just dry air and the silence of something recent. The closer he came, the less certain he felt. It didn't look dead, not exactly, but it didn't look alive either. The air around the leopard held no scent of blood. That ruled out a fresh injury. But its limbs were too thin, its spine too visible, its breath too slow. Nuru crouched 10 feet away and lowered his hand near the ground. Not to call, not to provoke, just to test. Nothing. The leopard's ears didn't flick. The chest kept rising, shallow, mechanical. A single fly crawled across its nose, unbothered. Nuru stood and moved closer, boots pressing lightly into the soil. One more step, then 2. Still nothing. At this range, he could see the light tremble at the base of the leopard's flank, a muscle twitching once every few seconds. The eyes stayed half-closed, the tongue barely visible between parted jaws, cracked with dryness. He spoke softly, more to the moment than the animal. Still breathing. He took out the radio clipped to his vest. A short burst of static followed the click. He kept his voice low, steady. Possible rescue. Adult male, severe dehydration, South Termite Flat, near marker 12. He didn't add the rest, that the leopard wasn't moving, that it might not last the next hour. The vet team would hear it in his tone. He waited beside the leopard without touching it. The sun shifted slightly overhead. Dust hung still across the field. A pair of guinea fowl moved noisily through the nearby brush, unconcerned. Nuru watched the leopard's eyes. Once, for less than a second, they seemed to sharpen. A flicker of focus. Then they dulled again. He could now see the arc of the hip bones, sharp and wide, not padded with flesh. This was not an injury case. This was starvation. Possibly days. Possibly longer. Something had kept him from hunting. An old wound, disease, age. There was no way to know yet, but the signs were clear. If the team didn't come soon, it wouldn't matter. Nuru stepped back slowly, giving the animal space it hadn't asked for. Every movement was quiet, intentional. The leopard didn't follow with its eyes. It didn't flinch. That, more than anything, told him the truth. There was no fight left. He placed the water canister nearby but did not pour. If the leopard turned its head even slightly, he would know there was something left inside. It didn't. They had maybe an hour, 2 at best. If the team didn't come in time, the leopard would die. If they moved too fast, too rough, it might still die. If it stood suddenly and ran, it would collapse. That was the risk. That was always the risk. But doing nothing wasn't an option. Not now. Not when it had let itself be seen. Nuru stayed kneeling in the dust as the minutes stretched long and the wind moved lightly across the acacia edge. The leopard didn't blink, but it hadn't stopped breathing. That was something. For now. Nuru didn't touch him at first. He waited, still crouched, hands on his knees, studying every inch of the leopard's body for change. There was none. No shifting of the limbs, no flick of the ear, just the faint, uneven lift of breath. Even the flies had grown bolder, gathering along the haunches and under the jawline. It was not that the leopard was too calm. He was too far gone. When the second patrol truck arrived, the dust rose before the engine could be heard. The sound made no difference to the cat, not even a twitch. Nuru stood and raised one hand to slow them. "Stay wide," he said quietly. "He's alive, but barely." Two field aides stepped out slowly, one carrying a folded tarp, the other a soft carrier stretcher with side supports. The vet's assistant, Mecca, brought the field pack. She didn't speak as she moved beside Nuru. They both stood for a long moment, just looking. "Can I check respiration?" she asked, already kneeling. He nodded. He hasn't lifted his head, not once. Mecca slid her hand slowly along the leopard's flank. Still nothing. She pressed two fingers just behind the front leg and leaned in to watch the rise and fall. 10 breaths per minute, she murmured. Maybe 11. No response to touch. Nuru stepped forward and lowered himself on the other side. He placed the back of his hand against the leopard's shoulder gently. The fur felt thin and hot. The muscles underneath did not tense or pull. No growl rose from the throat. No tail flick. The body simply accepted the pressure as if it were stone. "If he doesn't respond by now, he won't run," Nuru said, his voice level. "But it also means we're close to losing him." Mecca nodded, already preparing the subcutaneous fluids. "We can stabilize here, but no sedation. He doesn't need it. He's past that point." She inserted the small needle near the back haunch, releasing a steady drip of hydration just beneath the skin. The other aide gently adjusted the leopard's forelimb, extending it for balance. It moved like rope. Limp, loose, not dead, but far from living. Across the soil, the wind shifted once. A shadow passed overhead, not a bird, just the movement of clouds. Still, Nuru glanced up instinctively. Time was short. The sun would climb higher, and with it, the heat. The leopard wouldn't last under direct exposure. They needed to move. They rolled the tarp beside him, tucking the edge under the body. No reaction. Then, slowly, they lifted the frame of the carrier stretcher, adjusting angles, pulling the fabric tight. Mecca steadied the neck while the others turned the body, inch by inch. The leopard let out one sound, not a growl, not a cry. Just a thin rasp, like air escaping from inside a hollow drum. Then, nothing again. "He's still with us," Nuru said, mostly to confirm what they all feared. "But it's close." They slid the stretcher beneath him and secured the side panels. One aide placed a rolled towel under the head to keep it level. Mecca checked the eyes again. Pupils dilated, unblinking. This wasn't calm. This was a collapse. If they didn't get him to the clinic within the next hour, the organs would begin to shut down. If they went too fast, the jolting ride might shock the system. But waiting here, on bare dust with no shade and no strength, was not an option. "Go slow," Nuru said. "Keep him upright." They began to lift. The leopard's paws dangled over the stretcher sides, claws still sheathed. No protest, no flinch. He had no strength to flee, no instinct left to resist, and that, more than anything, told them what came next mattered most. He wasn't beyond saving, but only just. They moved in close now, the leopard already half wrapped in the edge of the tarp, his limbs lying heavy against the rough weave. The rescue team worked without words. Each person knew what had to happen, what had to be done slowly, precisely, without panic. Mecca held the front of the stretcher, eyes on the leopard's face. Nuru braced the middle, his hands beneath the ribs. Fingers splayed to catch the weight without pressing too deep. Two others steadied the hind legs and supported the flank. 4 people, lifting as one. The leopard did not tense. His body gave in fully to their hands. The head lolled slightly to the side, jaw hanging open just enough to show pale teeth stained yellow near the gums. His tongue had dried at the edges. One of his front paws dangled, claw just barely visible through the fur. The other curled inward, limp and unresisting. They raised him no more than 6 inches from the ground, the tarp taking his weight like a cradle. Dust slipped through the air as their boots shifted. The leopard's tail dragged along the edge of the tarp before falling still again. It was the only movement he made. Once inside the back of the transport truck, they lowered him carefully onto the padded crate, the one lined with vet blankets and a rolled towel for the neck. There was no struggle, no defensive breath, no attempt to shift his position. His body remained draped where they placed it, shaped more by gravity than will. "This isn't sleep," Mecca said quietly, adjusting the line of fluid at his side. "This is a body too tired to care." The engine started, low and even. No sirens, no rush. But the driver moved with urgency. Fast enough to close distance, slow enough not to jar. The dirt track wound back toward the station over uneven ground. The leopard's frame jostled only slightly, his head swaying once against the padding. His eyes remained partly open but unfocused. It was not alertness. It was the kind of vacancy that follows collapse. Nuru watched from the side bench, hands resting in his lap. He noted the chest, still rising, still falling, but just barely. One breath every 6 seconds, maybe 7. The heart rate had dropped again. That meant reserves were running out. Even the organs knew it. They couldn't stop now. If he slipped further into shock, there would be no return. If they pushed too fast, the system might fail from the strain. Every mile was a balance between collapse and care. Mecca checked the vitals twice during the drive. The fluids were still going in. Not enough to revive, just enough to prevent the end. 32 minutes passed before the truck turned off the main track. The field clinic sat low against a ridge, shaded and quiet. 2 assistants met them outside. No stretcher this time. They lifted the tarp again by hand. The leopard made one sound as they moved him, a low, unconscious exhale that vibrated in his throat like a breath pushed too far. It wasn't fear. It wasn't resistance. It was just the last sound a body makes when it stops trying to hold itself up. Inside, they placed him under soft light. No restraints, no cage, just a quiet room and the steady rhythm of monitored breath. This wasn't peace. This wasn't calm. This was surrender. And still, the smallest hope held, his body had come this far. If it could hold on through the night, it might hold on through the morning. But no one said it aloud. If he lived, it would be in spite of everything. Not because of it. The clinic walls held no sound beyond breath and movement. Light filtered in through canvas slats above the treatment table where the leopard lay. His body barely curved, spine sharp, legs stretched too long for rest. One front paw twitched every few minutes, not from pain, but reflex, the last remnants of nerve memory. The vet, an older man named Kamari, moved without hurry. He had seen animals near death before, but this one was different. Not broken, not bleeding, just empty. He ran his hands lightly across the leopard's abdomen, pressing in with flat fingers. No swelling, no warmth where there shouldn't be. The ribs pushed back easily against his palm, stiff from exposure and lack of fat. He lifted the cat's lip, gums pale, dry, teeth unchipped, no trauma inside the mouth. A faint tremor passed through the jaw as Kamari released it. That was not resistance. That was depletion. Nothing internal, he said softly. No rupture, no signs of poison. It's hunger, maybe 7 days, maybe more. He motioned for Mecca to adjust the IV line. The second bag of fluids hung suspended from the rigged frame overhead. Electrolytes this time. Gentle, slow absorption. Anything faster could shock the system. Nuru stood near the corner, arms crossed, watching the chest. Still rising. Still falling. But slower now. The breaths were silent except for the occasional low rasp of dryness in the throat. The air passing in was doing just enough to keep the heart moving. Kamari prepared a shallow dish with water and a few drops of glucose. No syringe, no bottle. Just a small cloth dipped in the mixture, then pressed lightly to the side of the tongue. At first, nothing. Then a faint flutter beneath the chin. The tongue pulled back. Not fully, just a twitch. Enough to say something, and the body still recognized the sensation. Mika leaned closer, watching the eye on the left side of the face. The pupil moved slightly. She reached out, not to pet, not to comfort, just to steady the jaw. Another dip of the cloth, another press. This time the leopard's tongue curled just enough to pull in half a drop. Then again. "Swallow," Kamari murmured, his voice almost inaudible. The throat contracted once. Then again. They paused, waited, watched. No vomiting. No breath hitch. The jaw trembled again, less from weakness than effort. For the first time in hours, the body did not refuse. "This is how it starts," Kamari said. "Not a recovery, just the absence of collapse." Mecca checked the pulse at the neck. Still faint, still there, but stable. The fluids were buying them time, not much, but enough to see what the next hour would bring. The leopard remained motionless otherwise. No shift of the limbs. No lift of the head. But the skin along the haunches no longer looked quite as tight. There was a faint ease in how the body rested now. Not comfort, but less strain. Kamari marked the time on the clipboard. "We will hold him here tonight. No sedatives, no feeding. Just hydration." "If he makes it till morning?" Nuru asked. Kamari didn't answer at first. He packed the cloth away, sealed the fluid port, and covered the leopard with a thin cotton sheet, careful not to trap heat. Then he turned. "If he makes it till morning," he said plainly, "we try food, but only if his body still says yes." Outside, the air had cooled slightly. Inside, the leopard's breath moved faintly beneath the sheet. A slow return. Not a fight. Not yet. But not refusal. Not anymore. Evening settled slowly over the Samburu clinic, shadows stretching long across the scrub beyond the tent. Inside, the light had dimmed to amber. The hum of day insects faded, replaced by quieter rhythms, the distant chirr of crickets, a breeze brushing across the canvas flap, and the soft click of a clipboard set down. The leopard had not moved since the last round of fluids. His body remained curved slightly on his left side, front legs bent awkwardly at the joints. One hind leg twitched earlier, once without pattern, then stopped. His chest still rose, but the rhythm was slower now, deeper. The kind of breath that suggested the body was no longer working toward recovery, only holding on. Nuru sat on a small crate a few feet from the mat, elbows resting on his knees. He didn't check the monitors. He didn't need to. Every breath the leopard took was visible. That was enough. Mecca stepped in once, leaned close to listen for the pulse at the throat, then left again without a word. The IV line had run through the second bag. No new drips were added. The body had reached its threshold. Any more, and the organs might fail from too much too soon. There was nothing else to do. The softest sound came then. Not from the leopard's chest, not from the line. It was the faintest click of muscle around the eye. Nuru looked up just in time to see it. The right eye opened, not wide, not fast, just enough to reveal the pale iris inside, cloudy and sunken. It blinked once, slowly, then closed again. Nuru didn't speak, he didn't move, he only watched. That one blink, small, weak, deliberate, was the first sign of awareness in more than 12 hours. Not instinct, not twitch, awareness. A glance given, then taken back. He let out the breath he hadn't realized he was holding. The leopard made no other sign. His body remained limp, his jaw slack, but that moment meant something had shifted inside, even if only slightly. A body near death would not waste the energy to blink unless something within still tried to stay. As the hours passed, they kept watch in turns. Mika checked in just before midnight. Kamari returned near dawn. But Nuru stayed closest. He moved only to refill the water bowl and adjust the sheet once when the wind stirred it too far from the flank. At 2 a.m., the leopard's chest rose deeper once, then leveled again. At 4:10, his ears twitched faintly at the sound of a dropped cloth. By first light, no more movement followed. The body remained still, but the chest, against all odds, still lifted. Slower, but steady. This wasn't sleep. It wasn't healing. Not yet. But it wasn't death either. The silence wasn't heavy. It wasn't grief. It was something quieter. The kind of waiting reserved for lives that sit on the edge, not knowing which way the weight will fall. And Nuru stayed beside him, not as a rescuer, not as a ranger, just as someone who had seen too many animals fade without anyone watching. If the leopard lived, he wouldn't remember this night, but Nuru would. By mid-morning, the vet clinic warmed again. The canvas roof buzzed with flies kept at bay by slow-turning fans. The leopard still hadn't moved. His breath held steady now. 15 per minute, shallow but present. No new signs of decline, but no lift of the head, no voice in the throat. Just quiet continuity. Kamari waited until hydration stabilized before preparing the machine. They lifted the leopard with care. Tarp beneath him again, not for restraint but to shift weight evenly without force. He was lighter than he should have been. Not just lean, hollow, as if part of the mass beneath the skin had simply given up, dissolved into the slow passing days. The X-ray machine clicked softly to life. Portable, old but reliable. Kamari guided the plates beneath the leopard's hindquarters first, then the lower spine, then the front shoulder. No one expected broken bones now. But starvation didn't come from nowhere. Something had to be stopping him from hunting. The images developed in a series of black and white panels, still wet with chemical scent. Kamari held the first against the window light. Nuru stepped closer. They both saw it immediately. The joint in the right hind leg, the hock, wasn't clean. Where smooth bone should curve in a simple arc, a jagged seam cut through it, nearly fused but crooked. A healed break. Old, not natural, not clean. The lower limb angled slightly inward, the bones overlaying at a wrong pitch, the socket uneven. Kamari tapped the edge of the image. This healed on its own. No splint, no reset. Probably 2 months ago. A fall? Nuru asked. Could be, but the gap here... He pointed again. It's more likely a snare. Caught low, the animal twisted, pulled until the break came. Then chew it for free. The second plate showed the vertebrae. No fractures, no signs of infection. The forelimbs were strong. The shoulder looked solid. Only the hind leg told the story. An injury too deep to heal right, too limiting to forget. Not enough to kill, but enough to wear him down. He wouldn't have been able to chase, not properly, Kamari said. Not for long, maybe small prey, but if the limp worsened... He starved, Nuru finished, not from weakness, from the limits. Mecca brought in the clipboard, recording the measurements. She paused beside the table, watching the still figure under the sheet. All this time, she said quietly, he was still moving, still walking. Probably limping for weeks, Kamari added, compensating until he can't anymore. Nuru looked at the leopard's face. The eyes remained closed but less sunken now. The jaw had softened overnight. The tongue no longer hung dry, but he still didn't lift his head, still didn't stir. It wasn't a defeat. It was depleting. He didn't give up, Nuru said. His body just stopped catching up. They returned him gently to the resting mat. A new line of fluids was added, now balanced with mild glucose, trace nutrients to test digestion. Still no food, that would wait. If the gut wasn't ready, it would cause more harm than help. Kamari placed the x-rays aside. The wound's too old to fix now, but if we can build his weight back up, muscle can compensate. He'll limp, but he could live. Nuru nodded. He didn't say what they were all thinking. The wild didn't forgive limps, not for leopards. But this one hadn't stopped moving until his body forced him to. And maybe, if they were lucky, he'd move again. 2 mornings later, the sky above Samburu Reserve paled without sound. No birdsong, no wind. Just stillness pressing against the clinic tent. Inside, the leopard's body lay in the same position it had held through the night. Head low, legs tucked slightly inward, as if he'd meant to rise and never did. The fluid line had been removed the night before. There were no last procedures. No new attempts. His breathing, slow but even, had held through sunset. But sometime before first light, it stopped. No sound marked the moment. No shift in the blankets. Just absence. Mecca was the first to see. She checked for a pulse twice, even though she knew. Then she called for Kamari, voice low and plain. Nuru was already standing outside, staring toward the east ridge where the first warmth touched the dust. He turned before they spoke. He knew too. They wrapped the leopard in the same tarp used to carry him in. Not tightly, just enough to shield the form as they lifted him, again with care, again with silence. His weight had not changed, but something in the lift felt lighter. Not easier. Emptier. They chose a place behind the acacia line where the roots reached deep and the shade stayed long into the afternoon. It was not marked. It did not need to be. They dug quietly, the earth soft from the rains 3 weeks past. No words were spoken as the body was placed down. Kamari lowered one knee to the soil, pressed the tarp flat once over the leopard's chest, and stood. Nuru stayed beside the grave as the soil returned, not rushed, not ceremonial, just enough to close the shape beneath it. The mound rose faintly when they finished, then settled under its own weight. He placed a flat stone at the head. No names, no symbols, just something to say it had mattered. He would have tried again, Mecca said softly. If his body let him. Nuru didn't respond. He didn't need to, because it wasn't a failure. Not here, not this one. The leopard had come to them by chance, broken, weak, nearly gone, and they gave him every hour his body would allow. He didn't die alone beneath brush or dragged by scavengers. He was seen, touched, witnessed, and for a few nights he had shelter. He blinked. He drank. He felt the presence of humans who moved gently without threat. That mattered. Not every rescue ends in return. Some end in quiet. Some choose to offer care, even when the outcome does not change. Nuru stayed until the sun cleared the horizon. Then he turned, walked back toward the clinic, and let the wind carry the rest. Behind him, the dust settled. The birds returned. And somewhere across the reserve, another leopard moved through the brush, unaware of the grave beneath the acacia trees, but walking the same paths he once had. 2 mornings later, the sky above Samburu Reserve paled without sound. No birdsong, no wind, just stillness pressing against the clinic tent. Inside, the leopard's body lay in the same position it had held through the night, head low, legs tucked slightly inward, as if he'd meant to rise and never did. The fluid line had been removed the night before. There were no last procedures, no new attempts. His breathing, slow but even, had held through sunset. But sometime before first light, it stopped. No sound marked the moment, no shift in the blankets, just absence. Mecca was the first to see. She checked for a pulse twice, even though she knew. Then she called for Kamari, voice low and plain. Nuru was already standing outside, staring toward the east ridge where the first warmth touched the dust. He turned before they spoke. He knew too. They wrapped the leopard in the same tarp used to carry him in. Not tightly, just enough to shield the form as they lifted him, again with care, again with silence. His weight had not changed, but something in the lift felt lighter, not easier, emptier. They chose a place behind the acacia line, where the roots reached deep and the shade stayed long into the afternoon. It was not marked. It did not need to be. They dug quietly, the earth soft from the rains 3 weeks past. No words were spoken as the body was placed down. Kamari lowered one knee to the soil, pressed the tarp flat once over the leopard's chest, and stood. Nuru stayed beside the grave as the soil returned, not rushed, not ceremonial, just enough to close the shape beneath it. The mound rose faintly when they finished, then settled under its own weight. He placed a flat stone at the head. No names, no symbols, just something to say it had mattered. He would have tried again, Mecca said softly, if his body let him. Nuru didn't respond. He didn't need to, because it wasn't a failure. Not here, not this one. The leopard had come to them by chance, broken, weak, nearly gone, and they gave him every hour his body would allow. He didn't die alone beneath brush or dragged by scavengers. He was seen, touched, witnessed, and for a few nights he had shelter. He blinked, he drank, he felt the presence of humans who moved gently without threat. That mattered. Not every rescue ends in return. Some end in quiet. Some choose to offer care, even when the outcome does not change. Nuru stayed until the sun cleared the horizon. Then he turned, walked back toward the clinic, and let the wind carry the rest. Behind him, the dust settled. The birds returned. And somewhere across the reserve, another leopard moved through the brush, unaware of the grave beneath the acacia trees, but walking the same paths he once had.